So stories, media, and broadcast are one of the ways that we can see and become. What you see is what you're inspired to look into for careers. So our freshman biology class every year does Black History Month with a Black scientists. The first one you're going to see up here is the Hidden Figures ladies. This is a major motion picture, and it's based on true stories of 3 women who overcame all the odds to work with NASA scientists. The one in the middle, Ms. Dorothy Vaughan, was such a great mathematician that they didn't want to run the calculations through the computer. The scientists and the astronauts asked her to run the numbers before they would get into the shuttle. This is a fan favorite from our freshmen. It's not because she's the first one alphabetically. This is Alice Ball. She's a chemist, and she was born 1892 and started to create a leprosy treatment. That's one of the oldest diseases in the world. It causes your skin to melt off. We can imagine that Alice, going to be a college-educated person before the turn of the century, faced a lot of adversity. This is 50 to 60 years before the civil rights movement, so she would have been attending university probably as the only person of color. This is Mr. Benjamin Banneker. He's even earlier than she was. He was actually in the He was in the Revolutionary War times, and he was a person who created one of the first clocks in the US, successfully predicted solar eclipses, which at the time was a really big deal. Our calendars were not super great. Nobody had access to clocks. He also published a yearly almanac, which is basically a calendar for the future for your plans, so you know what kind of weather to expect. He was a great predictor for field science. This is Patricia Bath. So she's a little bit more modern. Patricia Bath was an ophthalmologist, and she actually developed a treatment that turned into LASIK. It started out as technology that worked with cataracts, which are the lining of your eye. It gets cloudy, and then you have to laser it off. This is something you guys would see all the time. Some of you may know someone who's had LASIK, and it's a person of color who developed it. This is Mr. Guion Bluford, another fan favorite of the freshmen. So he was the first African American in space. We don't talk about NASA as much because our space program's been grounded for some time, but you have to go through a bachelor's degree in engineering or a related field, and oftentimes a master's or a PhD. He was present on the Challenger in the 1980s, so would have been one of the first rounds of affirmative action. This is Otis Boykin. He was an inventor. If you've ever used a computer, a cell phone, a guitar, or basically any electronics, you've used one of his inventions, it is the resistor. This is something that makes almost all of our electronics go. Couldn't make it into modern society without him. He also was involved in the development of the first pacemaker for your heart. This is Herman Branson, physicist. This one's most exciting to me. He was the co-discoverer of the alpha helix protein structure. So everything we know about proteins comes from this discovery. He also was a contributor in sickle cell anemia research. You guys may or may not know, sickle cell anemia is more prevalent in Africa because having half of the genes actually causes resistance to malaria. So it ends up being a very heritage-based issue. This is William Warrick Cardozo. He also was another sickle cell anemia researcher. I might as well tell you a little more about this one. So sickle cell takes your red blood cells, which are circle-shaped, and deforms them into basically a moon shape. If you have half of the genes, then you can still live a normal life. Oxygen attaches to your red blood cells like normal. But if you have 2 copies of the sickle cell gene, then you struggle for breath. So it's a really serious disease. Our next one is Marie Daly, who's a chemist. She's a little bit earlier on. She's from the 40s, and she actually was a researcher of the link between cholesterol and heart health. Again, for certain populations like African Americans, heart health is one of the leading causes of death. So this link would be extra important to her. Perhaps it was family related. Next one here is Mark Dean. Mark Dean's one of my favorites. He worked for IBM, which is one of the first computing companies. So he was a co-developer of the first computer. His discoveries led to the development of color monitors. He also made industry standard architecture bus. So this is basically a plugin that allows you to connect your computer to lots of different devices like printers. Last thing was he was the gigahertz chip maker, the first person to do that ever. And a student favorite, Lonnie Johnson is a nuclear engineer. He worked for the US Air Force and NASA, but we remember him as the guy who made the super soaker. Getting to the level where you work on stealth technology for the US Air Force means that you are an incredibly intelligent person. Super soaker made him incredibly rich and beloved. Our freshmen went into more than 35 other Black scientists, engineers, inventors, and there's dozens more out there. You're going to see these people in everything that you use daily, all of the products that you see around you, but we don't often look into that type of history or that type of science. Remember, like, you can be like these people. A lot of what they started with is tenacity and the ability to look at something, be creative, and problem solve. All stuff that we work on here at Northside. So if you can see it, you can be it.